Good morning and welcome to Senate State Affairs. We'll call this meeting to order, and we appreciate your interest in our agenda this morning. We will have our Secretary Peggy take a silent roll, and we'll start off with some consideration of some minutes from February 2nd of 2024. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've read the minutes of February 2nd, 2024 and found them to be in order, and I move their approval.
Second. Motion by Senator Lee, second by Senator Burnt, that the minutes of February 2nd, 2024 be approved. Discussion on the motion. Don't see any. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Don't hear any. That motion carries. Next, we'll consider the minutes of February 5th, 2024. Senator Anthon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have reviewed the February 5th minutes, and I move that they be adopted.
Motion by Senator Anthon, second by Senator Wintrow, that the minutes of February 5th, 2024 be approved. Discussion on that motion. Don't see any. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll entertain RS 31273, and Senator Anthon, you're welcome to present from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that indulgence. Members of the committee, I have before you RS 31273. In reviewing the number of statutes pertaining to parental decision-making in the state of Idaho, I found what I think are some holes there, and so this is a bill that will tidy up parental rights, the fundamental parental right of a parent to obtain medical records of their child. And with that, I'd ask that it be introduced.
Are there questions for Senator Anthon? Senator Winder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we introduce for print RS 31273.
Motion by Senator Winder, second by Senator Taves, that RS 31273 be sent to print. Discussion on that motion. Don't see any. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Don't hear any. That motion carries. Thank you, Senator Anthon. I don't see anyone leaving, so we must be here for Senate Bill 1289. Would welcome Senator Schroeder up to tell us about that legislation. Senator, welcome. You know the drill, and introduce yourself, and the time's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Senator Schroeder.
Yeah, turn that on.
Yeah, so much for knowing the drill. So, good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Senator Schroeder. I'm a state senator representing Legislative District 8, which is Custer, Elmore, Boise, and Valley counties. I guess first off, does anybody know who won the game last night? I guess there was a game or something. Anyway, all right. Well, that didn't work. So good morning, members of the committee. I have before you Senate Bill 1289, and I want to give you some highlights about what the bill does and maybe touch on a couple things of what the bill does not do. The first part, and I just want to preface this with, we continue to hear reports that there is pornographic material available to minors in our libraries. So in order to figure out the degree to which that's happening, or if it's happening in a particular case, what we have going on now is people claiming that it happens. We have library directors correctly saying, no, it's not, or this doesn't meet the standards, but you have people carrying the narrative that they have somehow found this. Well, we have a statutory definition in Idaho Code 1815-14-6A for material that is harmful to minors. And so the first part of what this bill seeks to do is to get everybody grounded and pointed in the same direction as to what a definition of material harmful to minors is. So all parts of the process throughout this make reference to the same definition of material harmful to minors in Idaho, and it incorporates the Miller test, and it constitutionally adds a reference to minors. The second thing the bill does is establishes a material review committee, no less than 3 persons, at least one, the parent of a minor child in the district, and it may be the governing board, or it could include members of the governing board. That's up to the decision of the library. So library boards, school boards have a great deal of business they must attend to. If they don't want to have to deal with these sorts of things, they can appoint a review committee to do so. They can encourage members of the community to be part of that review committee. The third thing is this requires that there be a form, a compliant form that refers to the statutory definition of material harmful to minors, and the person requesting that this material be moved or placed in an adult section has to be framed in terms of that statute. So in other words, you show up and say, I want to do something about this book, you're going to be reviewing the Idaho Code section, and you're going to see the degree to which a particular piece that you're objecting to does or does not meet that definition. The fourth part is it requires an orderly process, a hearing process to determine whether the material in question does meet that definition. So the person objecting gets to present to the review committee about why the material does meet this definition. Other persons who are interested are able to participate in the hearing, and they have a right to testify. Currently, what you have is a complaint, a dissatisfied patron, and then they have to show back up at open mic night with pitchforks and torches, and everybody's yelling and nobody gets anywhere. So what this does is says, we're gonna have a hearing like a zoning hearing. The applicant makes a presentation, there's a rebuttal, and there's a closure, and then the committee. The next part is it requires a reasoned written decision of the committee as to whether or not the material in question meets the statutory definition and whether or not the material should be moved. So that's the main part of this, which is to get libraries and their patrons involved in learning about the degree to which materials can be ordered by the government to be segregated to an adult section, passing constitutional muster using the Miller test. If, for some reason, a patron thinks that that review committee has cooked the books on their decision and just skewed it and just summarily said, we're going to segregate the book, or no, we're not, it allows for judicial review of that decision. And a judge can take a look over the shoulder and say, did they arrive at this decision using reason? Did they use the standards contained in the statute? Did they use the standards contained in the Constitution to arrive at the decision? But that judicial review process isn't available unless and until the person first says, hey, you guys got this wrong, I want you to reconsider. So you have to ask the board to reconsider. If you think they got it wrong, if they fail to do that or don't do it, then you can seek judicial review. If a review committee orders material to be moved and the library still somehow fails to move the book, and the patron says, hey, library, you failed to move the book, I'm giving you notice that you need to move the book as the review board ordered, then and only then can a person seek a private right of action to have that enforced. The other fallback here is in the last section that allows a county prosecutor to seek injunctive relief to require a district or a city to follow the requirements of the act. So if a district or a city is not following the requirements, a prosecutor can seek injunctive relief. So those are the highlights of the bill. I would be happy to answer any questions, but I would like my co-sponsor, if you would allow, Mr. Chairman, Representative Jaron Crane, who is my partner in drafting this bill, to come up and give some.
Representative Crane? Sounds like you've been called. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself for the record.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jaron Crane, District 12 in Nampa. So yeah, I'll just give a couple of comments in addition to what Senator Schroeder has already outlined. There was two issues from House Bill 314 last year that we passed off the House and Senate floor that the governor had issue with. He wanted us to go and address that there wouldn't be any frivolous lawsuits, and he also did not want any library in Idaho to go bankrupt over this legislation. So I think what we have come up with here, Senator Schroeder and myself, is a very good bill to address both of those things. On page 2, starting at line 5, you're going to see the written relocation form. That form will reference directly Idaho Code 1815-14-6A. So if you find a piece of material in the library and you think that it needs to be relocated to an adult section, you'll have to fill out that form and reference on that form the things that that book violates. You'll turn that in, and then they go to the review committee and go through the process that Senator Schroeder's outlined there. So that right there is going to eliminate a lot of those frivolous lawsuits, so to speak. We also lowered the damages from last year's bill, House Bill 314, from $2,500 to $250. With the process and the lowering of the damages, we believe we have addressed the governor's concerns with House Bill 314. And so we ask that you give this your green light here in this committee today, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Were there questions for either Senator Schroeder or Representative Crane? Senator Taves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for working on this important issue. I have some questions. I have two questions, really, and it's all going to come down to the harmful to minors portion of this. The first question has to do with the value prong of the Miller test. That's the portion, it's in our Idaho statute. It's at the end of section A. It says, according to prevailing standards in the adult community, after the decision in Supreme Court decision Pope versus Illinois, they switched to the reasonable person standard. So I'm just wondering why that hasn't been changed, or we're not relying on more updated law.
Senator Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Taves, happy to address that question. Pope v. Illinois was a case regarding an adult selling adult material to adults. Pope v. Illinois, in fact, I made a note. The controlling law for what material is harmful to minors is Ginsburg and not Pope. Pope v. Illinois, and again, is not applicable in this case. So Justice Stevens, and in fact, when you read Ginsburg regarding the ability to define material harmful to minors, there's more latitude with respect to minors in the Ginsburg case, which I have a copy of here. But what I'll do is quote Justice Stevens in his dissent in Pope at footnote 11. As for prohibiting the sale or exhibition of sexually explicit material to minors or material containing depiction of minors, it has long been established that the state may go beyond the constitutional definition of obscenity. So Pope v. Illinois has no applicability to Idaho's rendition of this code.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Follow up.
Follow up, Senator Taves.
In Ginsburg, what did they use? Did they use the prevailing standard language that we see here?
Senator Schroeder.
The prevailing standard is with what's respect to harmful to minors, and so, yes.
Okay. Second question.
Senator Taves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Second question, I'm wondering why we're excluding B in our harmful to minors statute. We're just calling out A. B says the quality of any material or of any performance or of any description or representation in whatever form which as a whole has the dominant effect of substantially arousing sexual desires in persons under the age of 18. And that's been excluded based on what you put in the bill.
Senator Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Taves, for that question. B goes too far. So in other words, Ginsburg lets you, under the holding in Ginsburg, you can use the Miller test, which is 1514-6A. B would allow the state to mandate more restrictive, and so we excluded B.
Just one final question.
One last one, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're going outside of, and we're outside of our current definition in Idaho Code of what is harmful to minors in this legislation. Is that correct?
Senator Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No. Material harmful to minors includes one or both of the following, according to this. What we're restricting, in other words, what we're mandating that a library must, to be statutorily correct, what they must segregate is that which falls under the category in A. Libraries are still free to curate and manage their collections with respect to any age. They can sub-bracket things. This is for 5 to 6. And so if the library wants to use some of the standards in B, they're certainly able to do so. If we, as the state government, ordered a library to do something under B, we would be outside of Ginsburg and outside of the Miller test, which is why we didn't use it.
Senator Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Schroeder, I'm learning here, but do libraries do they currently have policies that in place for patrons to challenge materials?
Senator Schroeder.
Yes, they do, Mr. Chairman and Senator Harris. Yes, they do.
Senator Burnt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Senator Schroeder. And the Chiefs won last night, if you didn't watch ESPN this morning. I don't know if you caught that or not.
Is that the Albuquerque Chiefs?
I don't know.
Okay.
Question.
Sorry.
You know, we received a lot of emails regarding censorship and banning of books. Walk me through, and what would you tell those that say that this bill is banning books in some way or creating more or censorship? What would be your response to that?
Senator Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Burnt. So the response is we, by doing this, aren't involved in banning or ordering any books to be moved. What we're doing is having the libraries engage in an orderly public, transparent, fact-finding process. So the first question is the material harmful to minors? And so you have a lot of narratives out there. I will address Senator Wintrow's question that I have not found the answer to. That's the number of challenges. But what I am not immune to or ignorant of is the quantity of social media posts about materials that are allegedly harmful. And you have passages, you have single pages, you have all this sort of things, and you don't know whether the material is harmful to minors. So this doesn't ban the materials, it moves the materials that are deemed to be harmful to minors outside of the section that's accessible to minors in whatever manner a library chooses to do that. I would note that I got a great email from a city librarian or a school librarian in Moscow. Over the years, my district's library challenges have been resolved through dialogue. And in my mind, requiring libraries to present an objection form that makes a reference to a statute that defines that which is harmful to minors, that requires a movement of the material, is part of the process of educating the public and educating whether or not you have a complaint that can be lodged that will result in the moving of books. And so they're not banning any books. There's a narrow subset of books that could be moved under this, but an adult patron is still going to be able to access those books. Does that answer your question?
Senator Burnt?
Thank you. That answered my question. One more question. And just to clarify, can someone file a private right of action before judicial review, according in your bill?
Senator Schroeder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Burnt. So judicial review is intended just to see if they arrived at the decision through an exercise of reason and using the standards contained in the statute, the library's policies, and the Constitution. They don't have to seek judicial review. So if the library board says this is a dirty book and put it over in the adult section, and somehow the library does not do that, so you're satisfied with the decision that it is in fact a dirty book, you are satisfied with the decision that the board ordered it to be moved, and somehow the library fails to move it, and you notify the library that they have failed to move it, then you can do a right of action. But you don't have to seek judicial review of the decision. Speaking of the judicial review, however, this protects both sides of that debate. In other words, if I believe that the library has improperly ordered a book moved, then I can seek judicial review of that decision as well. But the private right of action could accrue without judicial review if you accept the decision, the library has not complied with it, their own decision, then you can.
Senator Winthrow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Schroeder. So good to see y'all. Couple questions. Number one, I did find the answer to my own question. So if you're interested in that, I'll tell you later or now. But I asked you that question about, hey, have we seen how many complaints have been filed in the last year or two? And I did reach out to the Association for Libraries, and it looks like in 2022, there were 32 challenges of 67 titles. 2021, 3 challenges. 2022 challenges. 2019, 3 challenges. So there seems to be something happening in the last couple of years, but just so you know that. My question is this. What are the implications for the size of libraries? Like, I'm in a big city, we have a lot of staff in my library versus a small rural library, teeny tiny. Maybe you can go through some of the implications for staffing and some of these decisions as well as finances that you might see as you kind of have researched this bill.
Senator Schroeder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Wintrow, I think the implications are really minimal because as this good librarian pointed out, your first interaction is going to be at the desk when you look at the form, when you review the form. This reminds me, if I need to re-up my 39H disclosure, that I'm an attorney that represents and work for a firm that represents 25 cities, including libraries. But the Latah County Library District that I represent has 5 branch libraries, one in Beauville that's in a little tiny church, to the Moscow main branch library. The ability of a library to say that they've complied with an order, their own library order, is up to them. And so as long as they take reasonable steps to prevent its access, I don't see a very big impact. The other The other thing that we took care to do in this was to make sure, like I said, I think in the intro, that the library board wouldn't necessarily be saddled with this additional responsibility. School boards, library boards have other things to do. There's sometimes, they can let another committee handle this review process. But the extent to which they engage in good faith dialogue about the material, the challenges can be resolved before it ever goes down that road.
Senator Winthrop?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Schroeder. Thank you for that. My other question is, I think I see that public libraries and school libraries are put in the bill together. And I was wondering about the decision to do that, especially since in a public library, I was not aware there was an adult section. I know of the kids section. Everything else, I guess, defaults to that, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Senator Schroeder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. School libraries were included in this because the school libraries are a place where we continue to see reports of material that purportedly meets this definition. And so this, again, allows an engagement. And there is a backdrop, and I don't have the code section from another email, but, or maybe I do, 336001 allows parents to restrict access for their own students. So that is already there. So this is kind of like, I guess, a suspenders and belts sort of a deal, if you don't get that taken care of.
Senator Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Schroeder and Representative Crane. I think I really appreciate your work on trying to thread the needle. As we've heard, this conversation is not going away. My question has to do with a little bit of a follow-up on the definitions. So when you, on page 1, line 23, we define library, and then line 27, where we define school. And I just wanted to make sure that while it isn't called out, for me, it was really, you probably heard last year, I had concerns about our university and college libraries and making sure that our dual credit students still had access. So just a clarifying question. It looks like I looked at the additional statutes, and it looks like it would not apply to our colleges and universities, but just wanted to clarify.
Senator Schroeder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Lee. Yes, on lines 27 and 28, school means any public school district providing instruction for students in kindergarten through grade 12.
Follow up, Senator Lee?
Thank you. Just because our universities and colleges are publicly accessible, right? So you don't necessarily get to check out books, but anyone can walk into these. And I wanted to make sure that they're not included in any kind of reference for a public community library.
Senator Schroeder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Lee, they're providing instruction for students. So if to the extent they're not providing instruction for students, it wouldn't apply to them in those grades.
Senator Winthrop, you had said one more, but I don't know, are you good or not? You good? Okay. I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Senator and Representative. We're going to go to testimony now, and just for purposes of planning, we're going to limit testimony to 2 minutes as we call Robert Wright up. We have a lot of folks signed up. We want to try to get as much information or as many folks up as we can. So, Mr. Wright, you're up, and introduce yourself for the record, and you'll have a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Robert Wright. I work at the Idaho Falls Public Library. I've been in public libraries in Idaho for over 30 years now. So I have a couple of questions. I talked to Senator Schroeder briefly before the hearing started. He answered a couple of questions. The one remaining question that I have, the questions I had was public hearings, and he said that you could combine. So we got 23 challenges last August from one group. All the books except 2 were already in the adult collection. 2 of them were children's books that dealt with minority holidays, and they felt like that was un-American. That's a whole different issue, but so he's resolved that question for me. The other question I have is, it'd be nice if we had a process where we could just move the book without having a public hearing. We have that in the past 20 years I've been at Idaho Falls, we make mistakes. Sometimes books come in and they get put in the children's section where they shouldn't be. And parents bring and say, hey, this has got this in it, and it's really not appropriate for children. And we look at it and say, you know what, you're absolutely right. We're going to move that book, and we've done that several times. And we will continue to do that. But under this bill, I can't do that. I have to go to the expense of a public hearing and then have everybody come in and do the whole. And I'm okay with public hearings. I think the more people know about libraries, the more our processes are limited, the better off we are. And the other question is just private right of action. I've talked to 2 attorneys. They just disagree with Mr. Schroeder, but you know what? If I talk to a 4th one, I'd probably get another opinion. So it's just the record keeping that's involved in the Tort Act. They have up to 6 years or 6 months after a child turns 18. We would respectfully request an amendment that removes the private right of action. So that's it. This is the best bill I've seen yet. I mean, we can live with it. Those 3 issues are a concern. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Senator Winder has a question.
No question, but just a comment. Thank you for coming and testifying. You're the first librarian that's actually admitted that accidents do occur and books do get put in the wrong place. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Happens way too often, but, you know, we're people. We make mistakes.
And I think sometimes we all need to be reminded of that. We're not perfect. So thank you for
You're welcome.
driving up and from Blackfoot. So thank
Always
you.
nice to see my grandkids here in Boise.
Senator Winthrop, do you have a question?
Real quick, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Wright. Could you please, could you say that again? What books were being challenged? You said there were 2 about minority holidays and something else. Could you, I just kind of
So we
was
had
shocked.
we had 23 books total.
Mr.
2
Wright.
were, excuse me, Mr. Chair. Go ahead.
You need to go through the chairs.
I'm sorry.
All I'm
Excuse
getting
me. One of these days I'll get this right. Mr. Chair, Senator Winthrop. The 2 books were challenged. One was Fry Bread and the other was Abuela, which the Abuela book was about a child visiting their Mexican grandmother in New York City and the things they did. And the other one was Fry Bread, which discussed the history of why Native American people used fry bread. And it really came down to, it was a nice picture book of about 26 pages, and then it had about 20 pages discussed more in depth for adults. And they discussed the concept of fry bread actually came out of because when Native people were put on reservations, sometimes their supplies were minimal, and so they learned to make fry bread. And they felt like that was un-American because it said that sometimes Native people weren't treated with the utmost respect. So we get challenges all, and that's okay. Everybody, I just, one thing, if I could say one more thing, Mr. Chair, and that is everybody on both sides of this issue is trying to do what's good for children. I don't believe anybody's trying to ban books. We have different opinions. Good people can disagree on important issues. So, thank you.
Senator Winder.
Just for clarification, I think the testimony that Mr. Wright gave was that those 2 challenges didn't fall under this particular code.
Mr. Chair, Senator Winder, no, they did not. Okay. So to further your question, that's the other issue. It looks like we'll have 2 processes. One for challenging books that are fall under this law, and one for challenging materials that fall outside this. And we're okay with that.
Okay.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to Jenny Emersy Davidson. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Senator Guthrie, Chair Guthrie, and senators, thank you for the opportunity to give input. My name is Jenny Emery Davidson. I am a constituent of District 26. I grew up in Idaho, and I have worked in an Idaho library for the past 10 years. I oppose Senate Bill 1289. I could dissect the many real implementation challenges this bill would pose for libraries, particularly small rural libraries and school libraries. For example, if a little library like the one in Bellevue, which is run by one wondrous part-time employee, has to implement this process, it will be at the expense of other things, like summer reading or helping senior citizens access telehealth appointments. But I think maybe it is most important to dissect what problem this bill is trying to solve. What we have seen over the past 3 years, from House Bill 666 through to this bill here today, is not people being dissatisfied with library processes. In fact, as was just illustrated, there have been breathtakingly few instances of people even engaging in existing processes to ask for a book to be reconsidered. Rather, what we have seen, again, is just illustrated, are the attempts of a few people to label certain books as pornographic, not according to the Miller test or to state statute, but because they include homosexual characters or people of color. What we have seen are attempts to censor groups of people. That is antithetical to the First Amendment, it is damaging to individuals, and it is destructive to communities. In Idaho libraries right now, people enjoys the freedom to choose what they read. Parents have the freedom to talk to librarians to make informed choices about what their children read. They have the freedom to read with their children. People have the freedom to go to a library or not, and they choose to go by the hundreds of thousands because they trust and depend on their local libraries as they are.
You can wrap up. It's not, it's not
Well,
a
thank
drop
you.
dead time, but it's just an indication of wrap up. So.
Okay, thank you. You do. You all have the power to maintain this freedom that people are enjoying right now. Please reject Bill 1289 and stop advancing legislation that legitimizes efforts at censorship. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Winthrop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Davidson. Real quick question. So for your library, could you tell me what kind of requests that you've received for reconsideration and how that's gone?
Sure.
Ms. Davidson.
Senator Guthrie and Senator Wintrow. I have been in my position at my library for 10 years. In that time period, we have circulated well over 1 million books. The number of formal requests for reconsideration that we have received is 0. We have had conversations with people who, because we do actually have a problem that does exist, is there is an epidemic of loneliness in this country. And we do have people who come up to the circulation desk and want to talk about what they read. And as Mr. Wright just suggested, there will be conversations about where is this book housed, and it is resolved at the level of conversation. And the number of people who have engaged in a formal request for reconsideration process is 0.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Lindsay Clark Youngworth. Lindsay, are you here? Let's go to Sarah Bettweiser. Welcome to committee.
Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Sarah Bettweiser, and I am a contract lobbyist with the firm Signet.
Can you get close to the, there you go.
I'm here today representing the Idaho Library Association, testifying on Senate Bill 1289. The Idaho Library Association is a professional organization comprised of Idaho libraries. When I took the libraries on as a client a few years ago, I truly could not have imagined how much space they'd occupy in this building. It has been a challenging few years for folks on every side of this issue. I am proud to serve as an advocate for libraries. Libraries serve all. They are frontline for some of our most vulnerable populations. They are there to assist with literacy. They are frontline for our unhoused. They are frontline for rural folks who need to access telehealth. And they are frontline for those who want a safe place to imagine. Libraries are a community asset. While the ILA does not believe that legislation is necessary, as the overwhelming majority of our libraries have community-led collection development policies in place, driven by community-elected or appointed boards, we recognize the legislature's desire to put something in place to address the perceived issues. The ILA does not oppose Senate Bill 1289, and we are incredibly appreciative to have been included as stakeholders in the crafting of this legislation. While we still have concerns about some of the components of this bill, we are grateful that it mirrors and standardizes the processes that most of our libraries already have in place. And after years of trying to address this issue, we think that this is probably about as good as it's going to get for all involved. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to try and address any questions.
Are there questions, Senator Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Bettweiser. Thanks for that testimony. Is there anything in this piece of proposed legislation that prohibits the conversation that can be had? So if someone comes to the desk and says, hey, I'm concerned about this, must they fill out this form, or can they still have a conversation about, hey, someone left this book in the children's section, I wanted to bring this to your attention?
Ms. Bettweiser?
Chairman, Senator Lee, from my perspective, I don't believe that this would prevent anyone from having that conversation.
Don't see any other questions, and I want to thank you. I know you've been at least a couple years or more helping out on this issue, and a tough issue, but appreciate your involvement in those discussions.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go virtual to Heather Stout, or at least hopefully we'll be successful.
Hey, I'm
Good
here.
morning.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah,
So
welcome
go
to
ahead.
committee. Introduce
Start it.
yourself, and the next 2 minutes is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman and committee members. My name is Heather Stout. I am a retired professional librarian. My expertise is youth services. I live just north of Genesee, Idaho, and I'm representing myself. This legislation is totally unnecessary, and I urge you not to move S-1289 forward. Libraries provide library services and materials to all, regardless of who they are. Some parents may feel uncomfortable with certain subjects they find in the library, and you know what? That's okay. We are all different, and we all have different needs at different times of our lives. Parents have every right to parent their own children and to decide what books and materials they can access. They do not have the right to parent other people's children, and I would hope the state of Idaho would realize they don't either. Libraries in Idaho already have written policies and procedures, including an avenue for patrons to request reconsideration of materials. Under this bill, if there is a decision made to relocate materials, I'd ask, how will that exactly work? The language in this bill states that libraries will not make available obscene materials to minors. That language is extremely vague. It might lead to important books being relocated and removed just because they represent people different than the people making the request. What happens when a minor sees a book on the adult shelf, and I'll say in Beauville, and pulls it off? Did that library make it available? This language is so vague. It really creates real problems for libraries. And I disagree with Senator Schroeder. There is a huge financial impact on small libraries because most of them are staffed by one, maybe two people. Section 8 of this bill allows for any minor parent or legal guardian to recover $250 in statutory damages as well as actual damages. Are we really going to go down that path again, putting bounties on libraries and librarians? Instead, why aren't parents expected to be the ones monitoring what their children read? Please stop demanding that libraries and librarians do so. It's not their job. And in conclusion, Idaho librarians are being targeted. They are scared, and many are leaving the profession, and they're leaving the state. This bill will not help. It will intensify the exodus. Please table 1289 and do not move it forward. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions.
I don't see any questions. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
I'm likely going to butcher this, but Mir Yasar Saeed Bagari, and I sincerely apologize. It indicates that that individual is in person. Okay. Let's go to Jeff Kohler. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself for the record, and the time's yours.
Good morning, Senators. I'm Jeff Kohler, a trustee of the Meridian Library District. However, this morning I speak only for myself and not on behalf of that board. I have concerns about how 1289 would be implemented in real life. First of all, these material review committees called for in the bill will be best served by thoughtful, methodical individuals who won't be swayed by emotional public opinion. But anyone who's been paying attention to the culture wars surrounding libraries the past few years would think twice before sticking their neck out to get involved in a book review committee required to take public testimony for each and every book that garners a complaint. If you heard some of the vitriolic testimony at our past board meetings or saw the multi-night circus at the Ada County Commissioners last year when a group tried to disband our library district, you would understand what I'm talking about. I'd love to believe Senator Schroeder's statement that these hearings would go just fine, but I know from personal experience that that would not be the case. I've learned in my life to be a little bit suspicious of anyone who would eagerly volunteer for a politically charged social interest group. Good luck getting good people to sign up for that job. The other thing is that this bill would create a legal minefield for library boards. As a trustee, I have an obligation to limit legal exposure to the library and protect taxpayer money. A legal review is already part of our current reconsideration process, making sure that our policies are followed. But adding in this additional review committee complicates that legal oversight because the review committee's decisions would not necessarily be board decisions and could potentially go against the advice of a board's outside counsel. I predict that First Amendment lawyers would salivate like Pavlov's dogs every time that they read in the newspaper that one of these upcoming book reviews was on the calendar. Libraries around the state already have collection development and material reconsideration policies and procedures in place to make sure that materials reflect the makeup of their communities and that materials don't violate the law. Please don't pass a bill to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
Senator Wintrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Kohler. I want to ask you a question, but when you answer that, would you again clarify how long you've been working as a library trustee and what your experience is, et cetera? But what I'd like to ask you is this. Here we are, I think several years in a row on this issue. In your experience, kind of paint the picture of where this came from, how you would categorize this, because as I looked through the challenge list for the last years, it seems it's only been stacked in a couple years where we're seeing it. And I'm just interested in your perspective of where this has come from, what you're seeing, and if we already have all these policies in place in libraries, why do we need this legislation? Like, why do we keep going down this path? Are people just not using the review process? What's going on?
Mr. Kohler.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Wintrow, thank you. I've been on the trustee for the last 5 years and never expected to be immersed in these culture wars. It's already been stated, I think, where this is coming from. There's a greater issue going on in the country at large against certain groups of people, and these groups of people, I believe, see libraries as a target for such actions, and they use issues of books and library materials just to further their agenda for other things.
Don't see any other questions, and let's go with Isabella Burgess. Welcome to committee. Introduce yourself for the record, and the time's yours.
My name is Isabella Burgess. I'm representing myself. Thank you, committee members and Chairman Guthrie. I'm an associate librarian, and I'm here to urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 1289. Senators, this bill is redundant and puts an undue burden on public libraries as a response to non-existent problems. Libraries already have written processes in place to respond to requests for reconsideration. The system is working, the libraries are participating, you are just not happy with the final decision. Additionally, public libraries do not own anything that does not comply with the Miller test. This means that this bill is unnecessary and that the threat to minors is not real. Aside from that, this bill will bog down already very busy people and lead to widespread administrative gridlock across the state. The lengthy hearing process will take away from time to address real community concerns. This is not a community interest. 69% of Idahoans trust library staff with public book selections. That's according to the Idaho Public Policy Survey. Furthermore, we have no way to predict how many times this bill will be abused for illegitimate reasons. This will be coming out of taxpayers' wallets, as public libraries are publicly funded. It is a waste of taxpayer money to fund frivolous lawsuits with no real grounds. Libraries will be paying far more than $250 considering potential legal fees. We cannot fund bookmobile repairs, collection development, building maintenance, and other vital necessities when we are worried about the monetary setbacks imposed by this bill. Finally, this is a slippery slope towards mass censorship, which is inherently harmful to your constituents and defeats the tenets of a public library. Allowing lawful limitations on information access will lead to larger imbalances of power and narrowed world perspectives. An uneducated public is an unsafe public. Senators, do not be afraid of books. Be afraid of the people who want to limit access to them. Do not pass Senate Bill 1289. Thank you.
Thank you for the testimony. And just kind of remind everybody, let's be real careful about impugning the motives of others. And so just as we go forward with testimony, and are there questions for Ms. Burgess? Don't see any. Thank you for being in committee. Bonnie Schuster. Welcome to committee.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Chairman Guthrie and committee members, my name is Bonnie Schuster. I live in Boise. I represent myself, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. As a longtime library user and supporter, I have followed all of these library bills, and I truly do appreciate the work that the sponsors did to try to craft a bill that would balance the interests surrounding this issue. It is so much better than prior versions in that it would use established legal precedent to define harmful materials. It respects the important roles of the local school or library boards, and it does not criminalize librarians. Notwithstanding these improvements, I am against the bill. It will result in significant new costs for our libraries. The costs of the legal notices of public hearings, even if they get to use the state rate for the public hearings, the attorney fees that will need to be incurred to defend a request for judicial review, and the potential civil penalties and damages. Such costs will be particularly burdensome for our smaller libraries. These are public libraries. They are for all of us, not just people who look and live and think and pray like you and I. Their collections must include a wide range of materials to serve all of us. This issue does not require legislation. Many of our libraries, especially the larger ones, already have robust processes for patrons to request reconsideration of materials. I've read a whole lot of those policies over the last several weeks. Beyond these policies, the solution is the same as it always was: parental responsibility. Please do not advance this bill and let our libraries focus on serving all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for being in the committee. I don't see any questions. Thank you for joining us this morning. Let's go with Martha Williams virtually. Ms. Williams, can you hear us? Yeah, I think you might be muted.
Oh. How about now?
How about now? That works. Introduce yourself
Great,
and the time's
thank you.
yours.
Good morning. I'm Martha Williams. I'm a member of District 26. Thank you for your time. I've worked at a library for the last 5 years, and I won't reiterate some of the great points that others like my colleague Jenny Emery Davidson or Jeff Kohler and Heather Stout have made, but I do want to urge you to not advance this bill. One thing I do like about the bill, this is the single thing I like, is its emphasis on local communities. Yet it's unclear why individual libraries need the legislature to tell them how to do what they're already doing, as I think has been shared through many of the comments so far. Libraries and librarians are responsive to their communities, and they have a responsibility to be responsive to all members of a community, not just to those who are loudest or object specific materials. Those who are quietest are often those most in need of the library's attention, and this bill will only restrict librarians' ability to serve these people and their entire and pluralistic communities. I ask this committee to consider the voices of all Idahoans as you evaluate this bill. Who is it really helping, and who might it harm? Will you listen to the voices of those who trust their libraries and understand them as places where different opinions and values can coexist? Or will you listen to the voices that imply libraries are dangerous places? Senator Schroeder said that this bill does not ban books, but what it does do is allow individuals to ban books from access from the rest of their communities, and that is censorship. Libraries are not dangerous places. Unless one fears diversity of thought, the multiplicity of experiences and values, and Idahoans' ability to coexist and thrive together. Dialogue, as Senator Schroeder also said, is what we need, not legislation. Librarians in their communities can have dialogue without legislation, and they are, and we are, doing this. This bill is not needed by Idahoans, our communities, or our libraries. This bill, and any future similar bill, takes you away from the important work of guiding our state. It takes librarians away from their work for their communities, but it empowers the wishes of those who are vocal and not representative of the majority of Idahoans. Please reject this bill and similar future efforts, and please instead devote your energy to bills that people in Idaho do want and do need. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and your audio is exceptional. I wish everybody's was that good.
Oh, good.
Senator Wintrow, you have a
Thank you.
question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Williams. Would you share with us kind of maybe, it sounds like you're having conversations in your community and your libraries. Are these issues coming up, and how are they being resolved by your folks?
Ms. Williams.
Yes, thank you. So we have, at our library, we have had a few conversations with members of the community, similar to what was shared earlier, I believe by Jeff Kohler. Many of these conversations have been grounded in what I consider to be misinformation. People coming into the library asking about whether we have books in our collection, which we don't have. Sometimes we don't have in our collection, or they certainly aren't in the areas of the library that these individuals are concerned about. And we have had these conversations, no formal challenges. The conversations have led to, I hope, better understanding. I don't know that they've achieved agreement, but they have been informative about where people in the community stand and what fears people have. And I think fear of change and fear of difference underlies so many of these efforts. And that is what I urge you to consider as you are reviewing this bill.
Thank you again for joining us. I don't see any other questions. Thank you. Let's go with Paige Beach. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Chair Guthrie. My name is Paige Beach. I live in District 22, and I have worked in Idaho libraries for 8 years now, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself. As others have stated, the financial aspect of this bill is, I think, the real issue. That takes away from our ability to do lots of things. So it's more than the $250, although I would argue that's quite a sum, especially for rural libraries. And I wanted to throw some kind of realistic numbers at people from my budget so they could kind of see how much $250 or more is going to cost us in terms of serving and providing resources to the community. So last year, and I'm with a big city library, so these are larger numbers than the rural libraries, we had $4 per child for our summer reading program. Our summer reading program, we want to give kids books so they can have at least, we know, one free book at home to read over the summer to prevent learning loss. We want to give them educational programs during the summers, keep them excited about reading. We want to give them incentives however we can. And we have $4 per child to do that, which, as you can see, that's probably not even going to buy us a book, right? So those are the numbers we're working with. We also have, I do a 6-week preparation class to get ready for kindergarten. A lot of our community members cannot afford to send their kids to preschool, and I do that for $0. So these fines, these fees, this time, this extra time and effort is really affecting the ability that we have to give resources and services to our community. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
And I would expect that those kids enjoy seeing your smile, so.
I hope so.
Yeah. I don't see any questions. Thank you for being in
Thank you.
committee this morning. We're going to go to our next one, and I'll butcher this, Doro Meserly? Maybe. Are you there, Ms. Meserly?
I am. Thank you so much.
Please introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, my name is Dora Jo Messerly. I'm from Soda Springs, Idaho, District 35, and I speak to you today in opposition of this bill because it is simply unnecessary. I'm a public librarian of 15 years. My more specific title is children's librarian. I run multiple programs a week for children's ages 0 to 18. From Lego Club to book clubs, from story time to music and movement, our programs are well attended and enjoyed by many in our community. Idaho libraries and librarians are not okay. In the midst of waging war against books, the shelves of our library have become the battlefield. Our patrons must not become the casualties. I'd just like to list a few things that I think need to be taken into consideration today. Throughout this process, I've been told multiple times and by a group of 10 to 15 legislators that librarians are not doing enough. This is not true. We are doing much more than we are ever being paid for. I think if you walked into a local library, you will find they already have this form. Every library that I'm aware of has one. When will we separate school libraries and public libraries? These are two very separate institutions. Library collections are largely driven by their patrons in their communities. My local library director has been director for 23 years and has never had a challenge of a book. The challenges that we have faced recently because of bills that have come up are people in our community coming in to actually ask the question if we have these specific books, because they are afraid we are banning books in our community. They want to be sure that every person in our community is being represented. I agree with so much that has been said today. I pray that you will not advance this bill. I will stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I apologize because I went with a silent J when I introduced you, but
It's all good.
thank you for correcting me.
Everybody does.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Mary Rucht, and I'll probably mess that one up too. Welcome to committee. Please correct me on the pronunciation. The time's yours.
No, good job. Good morning, Chairman Guthrie and committee members. My name is Mary Ruck. I have lived in Boise just for 8 years, and I am speaking for myself in opposition to S 1289. Different perspective. I'm a grandmother of 2 elementary school girls whom I love dearly. They are thriving in the Boise public school system, and both are avid readers and patrons of our terrific Boise Public Library system. Their parents, my son and his wife, they exercise control over the books that the girls read. Predominantly, it's their parents, my granddaughter's parents, it's their responsibility to manage those girls' reading repertoire, not the libraries or the courts or the legislatures. Their parents care for the girls' tender, developing minds, and they respond to questions the girls have about things they might read in books or on the internet or see on TV or hear in public spaces. Over the past several years, I have attended many committee meetings, hearings about this issue, and have yet to hear any truly compelling reasons for legislative intervention. Please don't spend any more resources on this problem. Fabricated problem. It is a local control issue, it's a parental control issue, and library collection standards and processes already exist, as everybody keeps saying. Though I believe there is no need for legislative intervention, if you believe you must pass something, then at least remove the civil cause of action and the financial penalties components of this bill. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it, and consider voting no on 1289. Thank you.
Thank you for being in committee. I don't see any questions. Destiny Hart? Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself. The time's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Destiny Hart, and I'm a resident of District 21 in Meridian. I'm also an elected trustee for the Meridian Library District, but I am speaking on behalf of myself and not the district today. As a mom of 4 children under the age of 12, I appreciate Senator Schroeder's work on this, and I deeply understand the concerns around this issue. But I believe that this legislation has some kinks that need to be worked out and has the potential to be very expensive and cumbersome on library districts. The legal fees that Meridian taxpayers will have to pay in order to have legal counsel help us untangle the conflicting language in this bill alone will probably number in the thousands. I only have time to address a couple of my concerns, but I've also got a document here for each of you that outlines all of them in detail. The first 2.5 pages of the bill reference a materials relocation policy. But beginning on page 3, line 14, the bill begins to use the language make available to minors, along with references to removing, segregating materials, or restricting access to them. This is incompatible with the first half of the bill and confusing, as I'm unsure what make available means. Are materials available to minors if they're in the adult section of the library? Say a book is relocated from the children's section to the adult section. Is that enough? Or are we also relocating books from the adult section to somewhere else just because they're not suitable for minors? I can't think of any other way to technically restrict access to books other than doing that. In that case, I can't imagine our adult patrons not feeling like that's a violation of their rights to access material in a public library that their tax dollars pay for. The answer may be found on page 4, where we learn about affirmative defense to civil liability. So we essentially have to check ID for every person entering the library and ensure that each child is with a legal guardian in order to limit taxpayer liability, which is part of my job as a library trustee.
If you could wrap up.
Sure. I don't come to you with complaints and no solutions. If you have to pass unnecessary legislation censoring materials in public libraries, please send this bill to be amended and consider the proposed changes that I bring today. Thank you.
Thank you, and you can give those to the page if you'd like, unless we already have them, but thank you. We're going to go to Mike Wade virtually. Mr. Wade, can you hear us?
Hello, yes.
Yeah, the time's yours. Introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Mike Wade. I'm representing myself. I live in District 26. I'm a retired school teacher and coach. I'm opposed to this bill because I'm among those Idaho citizens who want smaller and less government, not bigger and more government. I want local control and not state control. I believe it should be left to local governments to manage the libraries they fund through local tax dollars. I also want to make my own decisions for my family regarding materials in public libraries. To do that simply by having a conversation with my local librarian and not have another individual making decisions for me. Parents should have the right to make their own decisions about what their children have access to, but parents should not have the right to make decisions about materials and access to those materials for children that are not their own. I want my state legislators spending their time and my tax dollars on issues that are actually critical to the future of our state, and there are many of those, and not spending time and tax dollars working on a problem that simply doesn't exist. Our libraries are not repositories for obscene or pornographic materials, and any parent who wants to can already restrict access to any materials for their child simply by being involved in what their child is reading. Idahoans don't need the legislature making those decisions for them. This bill would allow any individual who thinks their child, quote, may be adversely affected, end quote, by a book to set in motion a time-consuming and expensive process that ultimately would result not just in the cause of action or judicial injunction, but could have expenses so high the library might have to close. I am an Idahoan who sees this bill as just another example of government overreach, which allows one individual to limit the freedoms and rights of other individuals. I see the bill as a waste of time by addressing a made-up problem that does not exist. We simply don't have pornographic materials in our libraries. I ask you to please vote no on advancing this bill out of committee and go to work on bills that address the many problems we have in this state. Thank you for allowing my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. Kayla Dodson. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Kayla Dodson, and I'm a resident of Boise, Idaho. I'm here representing myself in opposition, surprise, to Senate Bill 1289. I get it. Adults want to protect children. We can get very uncomfortable when the topic of sex comes up. What is normal, healthy childhood sexual development? What are the responsibilities of parents and caregivers? What are the responsibilities of all adults in the community? I think that's what Senate Bill 1289 is about, trying to address this. In my opinion, and an opinion apparently of a lot of others, public libraries and libraries in our public schools do an excellent job of providing comprehensive collections of media materials to meet the wide range of community needs. it is the parent's responsibility to oversee and nurture healthy childhood sexual development. Sexuality is more than just sex. It's emotional, social, cultural, and physical. Parents, not librarians, should monitor their children's library choices as they should their TV choices, their movies, videos, music, websites, social media, etc. Please vote no on Senate Bill 1289. I stand for questions.
Thank you for your testimony this morning, Ms. Dodson. I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcia.
And committee members, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Marcia Bravo, and I'm an Idaho native and a retired educator who had the privilege of teaching in Idaho public schools for more than 40 years. So I too have a little different perspective on this. Although I do appreciate the improvements made to the bill, I still oppose Senate Bill 1289. One of my primary goals as a teacher was to instill the love of learning and the love of reading. And to this end, I shared hundreds of books purchased on my own dime with my students in my classroom library. My challenge was to hook even the most reluctant readers and to provide them with the means to discover the world through the library books in my classroom. Countless parents thanked me. I never encountered a challenge to my library collection. They trusted me as a professional. In fact, it was like my students were my school family. I always shared, this is your home away from home, kids. Many of my children became lifelong readers. No doubt, school and community librarians share the same vision. We depend upon their professional skills, expertise, and insight to guide us. I am very thankful for their dedication and professional judgment. Committee members, as state leaders, we depend upon your wisdom to make things better for Idaho citizens. Yet I must ask you, how does S 1289 make things better for Idaho families? I deeply oppose it because it is counterproductive. It will instill fear among our teachers, librarians, and library staff by mandating undue burdens, undermining the profession, and instilling fear. Any bill that allows for the opportunity to fine libraries and bring legal action is unacceptable. Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you for being in committee this morning. Rebecca Proctor. Welcome to committee.
Thank you very much. My name is Rebecca Proctor. In the early 1960s, my siblings and I discovered the hiding place of one of my dad's books called Jokes for the John, and that exposed our little minds to some giggle-worthy new notions. But the only actual harm that was caused was my flustered dad when we asked him what beep meant, and we ended up with a kid-sized birds and bees lesson that left us all a little embarrassed but unscarred. Lesson learned, guiding works better than hiding. Years later, one of my kids suffered a lot of social anxiety, and the school counselor recommended we visit the school librarian about some book suggestions. We were guided to The Secret Garden, and it changed our lives. I eventually became a school librarian myself, and over the years, I introduced hundreds of children and teens to the magic of books, the joy of reading, and the power of finding reliable resources for learning and problem solving. The library was a safe and fun place where all kids were welcome. I had one book challenge in 23 years, The Revenge of the Wizard's Ghost. And I was grateful to follow my district's very specific written policy and process, and the issue was resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Most librarians are some of the nicest and most caring people you will ever want to know. And public libraries are some of the best readily available resources that we have to nurture and support children and families. If you want to do a statewide uniform book policy, challenge policy, that might be helpful. But the punitive side of this bill is a completely misguided culture war vitriol. And I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 1289 as it currently stands.
Looks like Senator Wintrow might have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Proctor. Thank you for your great story. It reminds me of my own childhood. You are just lovely. Would you share with me what you think? I love the story about the parent coming with the child because they were struggling and they wanted to read a book about something that changed their lives. What do you see as potentially harmful through these kinds of policies or debates to folks really searching answers or looking for themselves in books or trying to find meaning in the world?
Ms. Proctor.
Senator Guthrie, I just learned that. Go for there first, then Senator Wintrow. I just think that having books that are available, we do have kids that are in different family situations, different emotional stages, all kinds of different needs. And some books have to talk about tough issues that may be inappropriate for another kid. But that has to be available for those kids that need them. And those need to be available.
I don't see any other questions. I appreciate your levity and also your recognition of process. You get an A this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you for being in committee. John Howell? Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is John Howell. I'm a grandparent, resident of the city of Boise, and representing myself. I object to new section of Chapter 15, Title 18, Section 18157B, titled Children's School and Library Protection in its entirety. In contrast to what the bill proposes to do, minor children need to have available to borrow from a school or public library more books, not fewer. You see, Mr. Chairman and committee members, I trust minors, along with their parents, to be able to choose books wisely and without the oversight of a formal library materials committee or more written procedures. Why? Because minors, with their parents and the librarian, can choose reading materials wisely in consultation with one another and without interference. Minors need to be able to borrow and read a wider variety of materials, not a narrowed collection, missing critical publications from which the minor needs to learn. Please do not pass this amendment to the Senate with recommendation to pass. Table it instead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Thank you for your testimony this morning. Let's go with Grace Howitt. And you can correct me if I didn't get that quite right. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a handout. Are you okay
Can you
passing
introduce
this out?
yourself for the record?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
My name is Grace Howitt, and I serve as the Policy Assistant for Idaho Family Policy Center.
Yeah, and you can give that to the page either now or later, so.
I'll go ahead and give it. Where is the page? Well, I have it when
She'll
she's
be back.
Great. All right. Well, my name is Grace Howitt, like I said, and I am a Policy Assistant with Idaho Family Policy Center. We thank the sponsors for bringing this bill forward, and we sincerely appreciate the intentions behind this bill. As it stands now, we do have some concerns with Senate Bill 1289, especially in regards to how it will function in practice, as well as whether it will pass constitutional muster. That said, we look forward to supporting Senate Bill 1289 if crucial amendments are made. Our first concern is that this legislation uses an outdated definition for material harmful to minors that is unconstitutional under current federal court precedent. The current language found in Title 18, Chapter 15, Section 14, that is cross-referenced in this legislation runs afoul of the 1987 case Pope v. Illinois, which was decided after the Ginsburg case, which was decided in 1968. In this Pope v. Illinois case, the Supreme Court ruled that the third prong of the Miller test should be judged on the basis of whether a reasonable person believes a work contains value for minors, not on the basis of community standards. This outdated provision invites unnecessary court challenges that the state will almost certainly lose, which will needlessly waste state money and leave children unprotected. For that reason, we strongly encourage this committee to fix the definition of material harmful to minors so that it complies with federal law. Our second concern is that this bill allows a parent to take legal action against a school or library only if their board or review committee issues a written statement agreeing with the parent that a challenged book is harmful to minors and can violate the law. In practice, this means that a parent needs to obtain permission from a school or library board before they can seek legal remedies. And from our perspective, that's a bridge too far. Schools and libraries shouldn't be the judges in their own cases, and allowing them to skirt legal responsibility won't help protect children's innocence. According to public opinion polling conducted by Idaho Family Policy Center last year, nearly 74% of Idahoan voters want to see meaningful legislation passed that will protect children from taxpayer-funded pornography in schools and the public libraries. Senate Bill 1289 can achieve that goal, but only if it's amended first. And with that, I ask you to send this bill to the amending order.
Thank you for your testimony. Don't see any questions.
Okay, I'm going to give this to the page, and this
Thank
has
you.
exactly what can be fixed with the obscenity law. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go with Julianne Donnelly Zool. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself for the record, and the time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Julianne Donnelly Zool, and I represent the ACLU of Idaho, and I'm here to express our opposition to S1289 for three reasons, two of which have been uplifted by other speakers, so I won't spend much time on them, but I will focus on the third, which hasn't yet been addressed by other people testifying. While I can appreciate the hard work to protect people who will raise objections to materials in libraries and creating a process that gives several opportunities for their objections to be heard, first with the review committee, then with a full board meeting,
We lose you?
potentially in litigation. I would wish for any legislation in this area to spend equal amounts of effort protecting both libraries and the mental health of Idahoans whose how they're impacted by conversations about whether or not they should exist. So, uplifting what has already been shared, I don't think this is a cost-neutral approach. Having multiple hearings are things that need to be carefully orchestrated, careful written decisions, and there's nothing in this text that would limit the number of complaints that a single patron could bring. So a single person could file dozens, if not hundreds, of complaints, and this bill could not limit all the procedural requirements that are required after that. I also want to uplift that conversations about whether certain parts of the community, especially LGBTQ+ parts of the community, should exist, themselves cause harm. And that does appear to be animus that has been raised several times in testimony from the prior library regulation bill, as was emphasized by a licensed counselor in a prior hearing. Having regular community conversations about whether or not certain communities can exist is harmful to their mental health. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Don't see any questions. Let's go with Kathy Grismeyer. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kathy Grismeyer. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the City of Boise, and today just wanted to provide some feedback on Senate Bill 1289 to you all. First and foremost, this has been a long conversation. The city has engaged for 3 years on legislation around censorship in libraries, and I think I want to start by commenting that our libraries must remain open and accessible. They are community gathering places in many of our community, and they connect folks with access and opportunity. In the city of Boise, our libraries are led by professional and dedicated staff with oversight by our library director and appointed board of trustees. and that the Boise Public Library will remain an inclusive and safe space for all Boiseans. In light of the various bills that have been floating through the legislature over the last few years, certainly Senate Bill 1289, while we also agree is an unnecessary policy, given that there are local policies in place that are working and that have been crafted with local guidance and input from the community, this is perhaps the most workable policy that we've seen come forward during the legislative session. The definition of material harmful to minors reference reasonably aligns with constitutional provisions in the Miller-Ginsburg test. The creation of the Material Review Committee and its corresponding policies work within a framework that's already been created at the local level with either the elected or appointed trustee members and partnerships with librarians and their staff who know community. It also requires a finding that the material is harmful to minors before the material can be removed or relocated, providing some due process protections within this process. A few things that this bill doesn't quite hit the nail on the head. We do have questions about the continued inclusion of the word homosexuality in the definition of sexual conduct that's included, and the potential risk of censoring LGBTQI inclusive stories. The 7-day timeline for review is a bit tight for library boards to provide comments in writing. And then there are conflicting language provisions between Section 6 and subsection 7 around make available, move, promote, circulate, display, which provides some conflicting direction as to what would be the appropriate action the library would take depending on a finding. My time is up, so I'll pause there, but happy to answer any questions for the committee.
Senator Wintrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Grismeyer, quickly, I think you've hit on a point that I've brought up several times that I want to be clear, and I want you to be clear. In 6A, subset 2, it talks about depicts or describes representation and it uses sexual conduct. Sexual conduct is defined in 1815-14 as one of the things is homosexuality. So what you're saying to me is we still have not taken out the issue of homosexuality in books versus actual sexual acts.
Ms. Grismeyer.
Chairman Guthrie and Senator Wintrow, that would be our legal read. We have an attorney assigned from our legal department to the library, and their review of this legislation flagged concerns around that definition referencing homosexuality and the differing legal opinions around what could or could not be considered material harmful to minors. And our concern here is we would not want to be in a position where LGBTQI inclusive characters or stories would therefore be censored within the Boise Public Library.
Thank you for being in committee this morning. Ron Nate. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself for the record and who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ron Nate. I'm president of the Idaho Freedom Foundation, here to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 1289. Senate Bill 1289 would create a complicated and arduous process for parents seeking to protect their children from being exposed to pornographic content in public schools and libraries. Under Idaho law, it is a crime for almost anyone to provide pornographic content to children. Inexplicably, the law contains a carve-out that allows schools and libraries to make obscene content available to children. And that's exactly what they do. We have a history with the library, my family. We'd take our kids, we'd walk to the library several blocks down the street to the public library. We did this in Ohio, we've done it in Idaho. We love the library. But today, I don't know if I would trust sending my kids to the library just to roam free and see whatever is there. Have you seen what is in the library? We have stacks of content that we could show you, that I could read to you of what is going on in the libraries. Senate Bill 1289 was suggested as a solution to this, but it fails to address the underlying problems and actually makes them worse in some respects. By including 6A, but excluding 6B, we are now saying that part of the definition of harmful materials will be codified into law that will make that acceptable in libraries and for distribution when it is, in fact, in law, still defined as harmful materials. The bill makes no provisions or requirements for libraries or schools to preemptively keep harmful materials away from kids. They only have to react when someone complains. I would like to think that libraries are part of a community and part of protecting kids. I've heard a lot about protecting librarians and libraries today, but not a lot about protecting kids. If libraries are truly a public good, let's make sure they are in fact good. Thank you. I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nate. Senator Taves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for presenting today, Mr. Nate. I was wondering, it's not lost on me that we actually have now everybody opposing this bill, is from what I can see. But I'm wondering, if this isn't the solution, what is?
Mr. Nate.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Senator Taves.
And we need to keep it within the scope of what is in front of us, not what is out there, but you're welcome to speak to it a little bit.
Absolutely. First of all, one little technical problem to get to that is that relocation of materials in K-12 school libraries doesn't make any sense. They serve only minors. There is no adult section to relocate to. So that is a technical problem with the school libraries part of this. But I would suggest that this bill be amended or changed or brought back as a bill that truly honors the harmful materials restriction in Idaho law. That for some reason, like I mentioned, libraries and schools are carved out of dispensing this. Now, maybe that was back at a more innocent time where the concern was maybe anatomy books. But now we see what schools are distributing, some horrible stories out there. We need to go back to just removing that carve out. If parents are parents of their kids, great. Let's make sure libraries are good, and librarians, library boards can follow the law. We don't worry about throwing bartenders in jail when we make alcohol 21 and older. That's not the intent of the law, to throw bartenders in jail. The intent is to protect children. The intent of a law to protect children from harmful materials is not to throw librarians in jail. We expect them to follow the law. It is to protect kids.
Thank you, Mr. Nate. We're going to go to Megan Larson virtually. Good morning. Can you hear us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Introduce yourself for the record, and the time's yours.
Thank you. I am Megan Larson. I live in District 21, and I am chair of the Meridian Library District Board of Trustees, here representing myself. We have a reconsideration process in Meridian that I believe is more robust than the one contemplated in this bill. I just want to be clear that we agree that a reconsideration process is important. I have several questions on how we will implement this bill. I will focus on just one. The bill describes the process the review committee should follow in determining whether to relocate material and prescribes what the committee's written decision shall contain. On page 2, lines 21, 29, and 37, the bill makes reference to community standards as one of the factors. The others are statutory provisions, the library's approved written policies, constitutional principles, and factual information contained in the record developed at the public hearing. Idaho statute and library policies are readily available in writing. There is an extensive written record from court opinions on constitutional principles relative to library materials. We will have the testimony from the public hearing from which we could readily separate the factual statements made there from any other opinions offered. It is not at all clear, however, what the source for community standards citable by the committee is. Is it a church or service organization that I should turn to? If so, which one speaks for the whole community and which does not? Is it the elected trustees of the library that are expected to articulate the community standards on behalf of the whole community? The legal risk to the library is significant, and it is a lose-lose situation. The library either does not comply with the requirements of the bill, or it runs afoul of the constitutional requirement well documented in case law that it not discriminate based on viewpoint or content. Statutes, policy, constitutional principles, and factual testimony are sufficient sources upon which the committee could base its decision. Barring a citable source for community standards, I respectfully request that the phrase be stricken from the bill, as it places the review committee in a position that is at best very difficult to defend and at worst brazenly unconstitutional. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. I don't see any questions. Appreciate you joining us this morning. Lynn Oliver.
you.
Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Lynn Oliver. I'm a resident of Boise, Idaho. I've lived in Idaho 10 years, just representing myself.
Maybe pull that mic down just a little bit. There you go.
I support Idaho libraries and oppose this bill. I'll keep this short since most everybody's covered my points, but first, this is a non-issue. It's really being generated by an extremely small and vocal minority and does not represent the majority of Republican and or Democrat Idahoans. And I think we remember these things when we vote. Second, this bill is going to cost Idaho taxpayers money. And this bill adds lots and lots of additional bureaucracy to our libraries and our judicial system. And bureaucracy is a direct cost that's paid by myself as a taxpayer. And I think this really needs a much more thorough discussion of by the committee, what's this going to cost all the libraries and the judicial system. In general, I thought, this is an unfunded mandate, which is something Republicans generally were not in favor of. Third, concerning the judicial review, it's just a complicated and already complicated process. I have to question, why would we add this to the judicial system's list of issues that they already have to deal with? I think maybe some judges need to be asked if they have the time to do this. Finally, when you talk about the book review committees, I'm probably a typical person. My local library might go out and try to recruit since I'm up here testifying. And I have to question my own sanity if I would want to enter into that world. Hard work, subjecting myself and my family to potential ridicule just to do a citizen's type of duty, very challenging. So in conclusion, the bill should probably be dropped. The libraries don't need this. Let's let the lowest level of government function as designed, which I thought used to be a solid Republican dogma. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For your testimony. Vicki Fadness, I think, is going to join us on the phone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. The
Hello?
time's yours. Introduce yourself for the record.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman Guthrie and committee members. I'm Vicki Fadness from District 7, representing myself. I oppose Senate Bill 1289 because it's not necessary. It's parents' responsibility to set family standards, expectations, and consequences for their children, not the state's responsibility. 1289 strains libraries financially and staff stability. 1289 does nothing to clearly define, again, what material can be found harmful to minors, particularly regarding homosexuality. Any research book providing detailed images and script regarding reproduction, puberty, digestive systems could easily be challenged. Novels where a character's race, color, language, gender identity, or ethnic origin may also be challenged. Once challenged, the rigid 28-day process begins. Librarians are bound by personal and professional standards to consider all patrons in their districts. This bill requires repeated submissions and responses within 7-day cycles. There is no cap to the number of submissions presented at any one time. Additional staff hours will be required during this process, again, straining library funds and staff time. Many rural libraries have extremely limited space with one librarian present. Finding additional space to put barriers is impossible. Other libraries, the location of books may require the purchase of additional shelving and remodeling, and the cost will be an additional burden. Most importantly is the punitive action against librarians, teachers, and others. I feel is outrageous. It just causes fear and a lot of anxiety for our teachers and our librarians. These civil servants are providing an access to a world of resources for all patrons. They do not promote pornography nor provide harmful materials to patrons. It's time to
You could wrap
finalize
up.
legislation addressing the real source of inappropriate materials through the streaming and internet services. I oppose Senate
could wrap
Bill
up, please.
1289. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Dorr. Welcome to committee, and the time is yours. Introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, Chairman Guthrie and members of the committee. My name is Jessica Dorr, and I am the director of the Boise Public Library. Public libraries all over the state of Idaho are committed to providing access and opportunity for everyone in our community. At our library, like libraries throughout the state, we strive to make sure every single person who comes into our library can find a book that educates them, entertains them, inspires, or challenges them. Libraries must continue to have the space to provide a wide range of materials that reflect the diversity and interests of our entire community. Our library is led by professional, dedicated staff with oversight by a director and an appointed board of trustees. Together, library leaders have already created local, well-functioning policies that protect residents, preserve access to information, and provide due process when reviewing materials that may be called into question. The Boise Public Library strongly rejects the notion that any library in Idaho is providing inappropriate and/or obscene materials to minors. Like other libraries across the state, our collection development policy is clear. In addition, it allows for a request for reconsideration that is overseen at the local level. We provide clear process for community members, the public, to address any concerns, and we welcome conversations and dialogue. Senate Bill 1289, while a solution in search of a problem, does provide a path forward for local libraries to provide access to a diverse range of materials. This definition of harmful to minors reasonably aligns with the constitutional provisions provided in the Miller-Ginsburg test. There are some vague statements that could create a lack of clarity. Those have been raised, and I encourage that this committee considers those and provides attention to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Winthrop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Dorr. I appreciate your testimony. I remember, I think it was last year, I went down to the library when there was all these bills going on and titles being challenged. And I said, hey, I want to see these books. And I remember you showing me a sexual health education book. And you said, I think, that book was requested by somebody wanting to talk to her daughter about sex, and then it was challenged by another person. So does that happen regularly, and how do the conversations go when that happens?
Ms. Dorr.
Chairman, Senator Winthrop, yes, I have been in the absolute position of the first two requests for reconsideration that came to the library when I became director. These are books that were in our collection that a member of the community had asked us to reconsider their location. In particular, the book you're referring to was a book that was about health education, and it included puberty, and someone had asked that it be moved to an adult section. When we looked at where those requests for reconsideration came from, those books were books that were requested by another member of our community. So I think that really shows the breadth of interests of our community. And so where a book that someone had asked, I want to know something that is reputable. I want to know something that includes accurate scientific information. People come to the library because we do the work of making sure that we are finding books, particularly I think that one was recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And so that was a book that we had brought into our collection because someone had requested it, and then we had someone who requested that we relocate it. So it really shows the balance and the challenge, but ultimately why it's so important that parents and caregivers are the ones that are making decisions about what is right for their family.
Senator Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Dorr, for your testimony. I'm just trying to understand your position. Is your position against the bill? And if so, are you representing the library, or am I misunderstanding that the city of Boise is taking a neutral position on this bill?
Ms. Dorr.
Chairman, Senator Anton, I am representing myself and I am taking a neutral position on the bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Let's go with Ryan Dudley. Or maybe not. Let's go with Brian Alman. Welcome to committee. Introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Brian Allman. I am a member of the Eagle Public Library Board of Trustees, though I am here speaking on my own behalf. And I want to ask you, what if libraries and school libraries gave out cigarettes and alcohol to minors? That would be absurd. Nobody would support that. We've decided as a society that those things are not for children, and we've defined the age at which children can become adults and handle those things. Yet there are some things that children can see on their library shelves that I think are just as harmful, and our current statute recognizes that, but it carved out the libraries and schools. The materials that have driven this controversy are not biology textbooks, not about classical art. They're clearly obscene. There's been many examples brought before the committees over the last few years. This really is about a fraction of a percent of the books that library staff curates. And as a reminder, they do curate. They choose what goes on the shelves. No library can handle every single book that's ever been made, so they have to make decisions. I think this bill is a good start, a way to ensure that the most heinous examples of these materials are kept out of minors' hands. I know many people in my community, the conservative side, are frustrated that the bill doesn't go far enough, that it doesn't provide a stronger method of removing these books. Obviously, there are many on the other side who believes it goes too far and that any obstacle to children accessing materials is too far. I don't believe this is about a First Amendment issue. I believe it's just about protecting children. I think this bill creates a reasonable process that allows patrons of a school or library to bring materials to a committee made up of their community members. If it's possible that the committee is stacked with people who agree with the existing board, at least it will be out in the open in a public hearing. They'll have to justify why they believe this book does not fall under those harmful to minor statutes. I've long believed that a community committee is a good idea. At a meeting last month, our library director out in Eagle also suggested that idea. It was unprompted. He came to the same conclusion. Eagle already has a request for reconsideration, and so I believe this strengthens what we're already doing. So I believe this bill is a good compromise between enforcing our basic statutory standards for what's harmful to minors and retaining community control over everything else. And so I urge the committee to pass this, send it to the floor with a do pass recommendation.
Thank you for your testimony this morning. I don't see any questions. Appreciate you being in committee. Sandra Mers. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Sandra Mers, and thank you all for having me speak with you. This is my first time, and I thought I probably wouldn't get called. I would just come and see what was happening. But yeah, I think I entered this in the computer about midnight last night. But I am a retired teacher, 30 years. I have 4 grandchildren, 2 of which live here in Boise. And I care about children, and I care about the people of Idaho, and I had concerns. I just moved here in March. I haven't even been in Idaho a year. And you might say, well, then why are you interested in our affairs? I haven't been here that long, but I am because I care. And I've taught long enough to see sometimes, like as legislatures, I think you look at law and you think, this is going to be good. This is going to help people. And sometimes there's unintended consequences, though. As a classroom teacher, I saw this happen in Pennsylvania. I taught most of my 30 years in rural western Pennsylvania, a town of 5,000 people. And one day we were called down to the, all the faculty was called to the auditorium, and the principal spoke to us that from now on, we were never to touch a child, not a pat in the back, not a hug. And I taught fifth graders. And some of those children needed a pat in the back and a good job and a hug when they hurt. But we were told we couldn't do that. Why? Liability. The teacher next to me tutored children in the evening, and the principal called her in individually and said, because it was a small town, everybody knew everybody, and there'd never been a problem, but he said, I recommend you do not ever in the future tutor a child in your home alone again. Why? Liability.
If you could wrap up.
Pardon me?
If you could wrap up.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
The last thing was I moved here from Florida, and I saw a teacher remove her entire school library, her little library, from her classroom because of fear of liability. The teacher made them take a picture of every book in their class. The principal made them take a picture of every book in their classroom and submit it because they were so fearful of liability.
Thank you for your
Thank
testimony.
you.
And whether you've been here 40 years or 4 months, you're welcome to be a part of the process. I'm glad that you are. So
All right.
thank you for being in committee.
And thank you all. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Let's go with Karen Hansen virtually. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you, but that's okay. Maybe
don't
you got
wanna
your
see me.
camera.
I'm not that.
Maybe you got your camera slide. What's that?
I said, you don't want to see me. I'm not that cute. Anyway,
Well, you made the committee room laugh anyway, so it's your call. The time's yours.
yeah, I sure appreciate that previous testimony. My heart goes out to those children who need hugs. Anyway, I'm Karen Hansen from Viola, Idaho. I oppose Senate Bill 1289. This bill will interfere with local control of public libraries. Local schools and communities have library boards and well-trained libraries who already do a very good job of managing any issues that come up over library materials. This bill is a major financial burden, and small libraries with limited staff cannot possibly comply with this bill's demands and still function. I have a step-grandson who's going through a very difficult time. He lives in a little tiny community. They have a small library, and he is depending on that library to help him cope. Anyway, this is a major financial burden, and small libraries with limited staff cannot possibly comply with this bill's demands and still function. And here's a big concern of mine with the current political climate nationwide and in the state of Idaho. It will open the door to harassment of our libraries from community outsiders and extremists, and will be particularly destructive to our rural and small town libraries. I am tired of seeing this issue come up repeatedly this session. Local communities know best how to manage their local libraries. This is unneeded government overreach. Please vote against this bill and leave our libraries alone. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. I don't see any questions. Let's go to Heidi Smith virtually. Are you there?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted.
There you go. Introduce yourself
Okay.
for the record, and the time's yours.
Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Heidi Smith. I'm from District 9 and I'm representing myself. Sexually explicit materials in our libraries aimed specifically at children have proliferated at an almost logarithmic rate in the past few years. Roughly 99% of incarcerated sex offenders cite exposure to such materials as minors as being formative to their criminal behavior. Such exposure alters development of the prefrontal cerebral cortex, which controls impulse and decision making. Idaho Code section, as mentioned by others, 1815-14, defines sexually inappropriate materials very well. Section 1815-15 further defines distribution of same to minors as a misdemeanor, with penalty being up to a year in jail and or $1,000 in fines, unless, of course, you're a librarian. We regulate distribution of harmful substances to minors, yet SB 1289 offers no codified penalty for distribution of these harmful materials. Instead, it offers a complex process which puts the burden on parents and citizens with no guarantee of relief. The books involved already have Miller ratings and are easy to identify. This is not rocket science, and it does not involve books that are of sexual education nature, biological education, etc. Please vote no on this frivolous bill and let our legislators get back to the process of actually solving this problem. We passed such a bill through our House earlier this year that actually addressed the issue. We need to continue to pursue real solutions. And again, I urge you to vote no on SB 1289. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for joining us in committee. I don't see any questions. Zachary Borman. Welcome to committee. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chairman Guthrie, honorable senators. My name is Zach Borman. I'm a constituent in District 20 and the president of the West Ada Education Association, but I'll be representing myself today. I'm here to testify in support of a group of dedicated professionals who have committed their lives and their careers to the personal, artistic, and intellectual growth of a dynamic and diverse population of our great state through our libraries. Do we believe this bill is egregious in the way that we have seen a number of other bills put forth through this body recently? Certainly not. Do we see it as entirely superfluous and supporting a harmful narrative about our libraries? Unequivocally, yes. If I'm to be entirely frank, this bill seems to be responding to an entirely politically manufactured crisis that was both created by and will now be solved by legislators with little to no concern for the reality of what's happening in these important public institutions. Absolutely no one was advocating for or actively stocking pornography in our school libraries or public libraries for the consumption of minors, and anyone labeling materials in our libraries as such is engaging in bad faith argumentation that threatens to render the actual definition of pornography so broadly as to make it utterly meaningless. If it is true that there were a crisis that we are just now catching on to that has been allowed to run rampant for decades, where are the injured parties? If the policies in place truly have been damaging children for this long, why are there not hundreds here testifying against the ongoing horror show of our public library policies? They're not here, and they never have been. The loudest about this issue appear to be speaking out based on misinformation, misunderstanding, or bad faith cherry-picked examples. In the ongoing culture war that is politically convenient foe, a villain of the week, if you will, that can be defeated to fit our good guys fighting the great evil narrative, even though there is no real threat, and fighting it requires very little effort. If there's really a mandate from the public or from people that the prevailing standards of our communities have shifted, school districts, one of the most responsive and grassroots democratic organizations we could possibly devise, have picked on, will already have been reacted and changed already. Everyone has a policy and everyone is probably already being overly cautious about its application.
You could wrap up.
Yes. I promise you all this is a necessary paternalistic bill and that it plays into a larger narrative that slanders and undermines one of our most basic and important institutions.
You could wrap up, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anyone else signed up. Is there someone that was unsuccessful? Okay. I have a couple. I'm gonna allow a little bit, but we maybe cut down to a minute because we don't have you on the sign-up sheet. So would you come forward, young lady? Introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mary Mosley. I did sign up.
Did you?
Yeah, I don't know
Okay.
what happened.
Go ahead then.
I'm here, my name is Mary Mosley. I'm here today to represent the American Association of University Women of Idaho. Education is our top priority, and we strongly support the freedom to read and oppose this bill for the following reasons. This bill is not needed, as several other people have said. Librarians are trained professionals who choose materials according to accepted professional criteria. And libraries already have policies in place to deal with challenged materials. A recent poll found that 71% of the public supports libraries and opposes removal of books. 90% have a favorable opinion of both public and school librarians. And 75% have a lot of confidence in librarians to make good decisions about library materials. Furthermore, homosexuality is defined in another section of the law as obscene. Consequently, any book in the library that has any mention of homosexuality could be challenged as obscene. The bill requires every library to establish a review committee of 3 people who live in the district to review and make decisions on challenged materials. The only qualification for committee members is that they live in the district, and one must be a parent of a minor child. They are not trained professionals, and there is no guidance as to how they will make the decision. If the library does not move the materials that are deemed harmful to minors, in quotation marks, any minor parent or legal guardian may sue for $250 plus damages. This may not seem like much, $250, but when you multiply it by even a fraction of the many patrons of the average library, it adds up quickly. Finally, parents should decide what their own children read, not what everyone else's children can read. This bill will have a chilling effect on libraries and cause librarians to fear lawsuits no matter what materials are available and where they are shelved. We urge you to oppose this bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Who else have we got come forward? How many total do we have? We got 1, 2. All right, we'll allow the 3 that have raised their hand in addition to this gentleman. Please introduce yourself for the record. Welcome to committee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. My name is Nick Grove. I am the library director at the Meridian Library District. I've been there for over 12 years. I've been the director for about a year and a half. It hasn't been the best year and a half, I'll tell you that. We had faced a petition to dissolve our library district last year, as I'm sure you all are aware. And it was vehemently rejected by our community, with the people that showed up being 100 to 1 that showed up in favor of the library. Our community has shown that it supports our library. If you look at the pro-library candidates who went through in this past election, including our library trustees, overwhelmingly they won their elections. This is not what your communities are asking for. This might be what people show up in your office and shove in your face with 1 page of a book, but this is not what your community is asking for. If you listen to your community and what the numbers show you, that is not there. In our library district, we had 1 request for reconsideration in 2023. In contrast, we have 170,000 items, print materials, and over 270,000 total items in our collection. And those checked out 1,580,000 times. So to put that in contrast, 1 item that was requested for reconsideration. Our process works. It works. These items that are trying to be dispelled from our libraries, they take away from people who do not conform to the majority, and they are the reason that I am in libraries. I grew up in North Central Idaho in Lewiston. My refuge was finding books. I didn't have a family member to turn to. I didn't have somebody to look to who looked like me to give me guidance to what I was going through. I found that in books. These items that are attempted to be in here take away that ability for people like me to find that solace. And it is very damaging. Now, I will say,
You can
I
wrap up.
appreciate the work that has gone into this bill. Half to 2/3 of this are palatable and can be amended to be revised. I would encourage you to look at what the purpose of this is.
Okay, Senator Lee has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Groves. Thank you for your service. I guess you can imagine that we're sitting here with lots of different sides. My concern is the amending order, right? So there's one group proposing things that need to be amended, and there's other groups that perhaps you would disagree with some of those amendments. In your opinion, having lived through this on the front line, do you think that by not advancing this bill, this issue goes away?
Mr. Groves?
That is, in my opinion, no, I don't think so. I mean, we've seen this issue for 3 years, and as was stated to me a few days ago, libraries are stiff-arming, is what I was told. Rather than treating us as the enemy, I would ask that you actually visit your library, talk to your library directors, and ask how this could be resolved, and have something that is truly useful for the community rather than something that is politically advantageous.
Thank you. Sir, did you sign up online and did you get indication that you were successful in doing so?
I signed up here. I did not have the online. I was still writing my piece. I didn't want to submit it
Okay.
without it.
That's why you don't show up on the screen. We're trying to move to an online sign up, just so we can expedite the committee process. We know how many's up, but trying to give it a little latitude as well. So
Understood.
the next one that didn't get in, and we'll get to the remaining three. So yes, looks to me like you're the most ready. So welcome to committee.
I don't know how ready I am, but I just stood up and decided to be brave. My name's Josie Christensen. Thank you for the time, Senator Guthrie. I guess I've been listening to all of the testimonies that have been given, and I've been thinking about those parents who came to a legislator and said, please, we need help. We need to clean out our libraries. And I'm feeling a lot of compassion for those parents. I'm a parent of 4 myself. I'm also feeling a lot of compassion for my mother, who maybe doesn't approve the way I live my life and the choices that I make, the books that I read. I think it's going to be difficult for you members here of the committee also to talk to your constituents who will be contacting you after you make the vote for no, or after you make the vote to amend this bill or this possible bill. And here's the advice I'd give you as to how to talk to those parents or those adults that will be coming to you. I would encourage you to tell them to go to their public libraries and to go to their school libraries themselves. That as I empower my own children or students in my classroom in previous years is to solve this problem, work to solve this problem yourself. Like having a state decision to do this isn't necessary. So if you have constituents that are worried about their libraries, encourage them to get involved in the processes that already exist. Senator Lee asked the previous testifier here that if we think this will go away. I have great concern that this won't go away, but I think that's within your power as legislators to say, thank you for bringing your concern toward me, but you do have these systems already built in place. Please go talk to your local leaders and local librarians. And if anything, I think this is a great opportunity for parents to have kids bring home books to which they object. This is a great opportunity as a parent for me to look with wonder and curiosity and say, oh, you're interested in reading a book about this? Why is that? It's hard to be a parent in these current times. The same kind of parenting techniques and tools that my parents use don't work. It takes a lot of work, a lot of curiosity to show our kids that we will love them no matter what their decisions and how their values may differ from ours. It's hard.
Thank you for your testimony. Did you try to sign up online or did you just sign up back here?
No, I kind of got up at 8 o'clock and got in here. And no, I didn't know. Just kind of rolled over in bed and went, oh, what? So I ran in. No, I
Thank
did not
you.
sign up online.
The next one that didn't get. Welcome to committee.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Marianne Saunders, and I reside at Schreiner Lane in Star, Idaho. I wish to first state I did sign up back there. didn't know about the online only. I'll pay attention. I wish to first state that I've been serving the past 8 months as a duly elected board trustee of the Ada County Free Library District, commonly known as Ada Community Library. We provide 4 physical libraries in the Treasure Valley at Hidden Springs, Star, Victory, and Lake Hazel. Our patrons number over 30,000 residents who have library cards. I have a very specific request as a trustee, but as an individual trustee, not from my board. My request is that you change the requirement for public hearing to public meeting. Reference lines 9 to 17 on page 2 of the bill. The overall changes you made in this bill from earlier editions are wise. However, a major concern stated by Governor Little during the prior legislative session regarded fiscal impact. I have a responsibility as a trustee of the tax dollars that fund our district. My concern regards the attendant cost with legal public hearings. Please consider the numbers. There are 56 library districts, over 100 school districts in the state of Idaho. Publication costs alone for a legal notice, for example, $188 is what we just paid for a legal notice for our budget hearing last August. Further, the number of reconsideration requests are unknown, but a current example that's been reported at West Ada School District is 44 requests still in the queue. When one multiplies all those numbers, the impact can be many tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. Nationally, this issue has brought well over 1,000 library items to the fore. So again, my request today is to change the public hearing language to regular and well-posted and recorded board meetings. I believe that approach would accommodate the public input need and provide a record trail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's one more, I think, that had their hand. Please come up. Welcome to committee.
Thank you.
I think you're going to be last.
Mr. Chair, yes. Okay, so I did not sign up. I did a check mark on the paper.
Okay,
Here.
we'll still let you talk.
Okay, good. Okay, so,
Hold that mic around so we can hear you.
is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Please vote no on Senate Bill 1289. I believe it to be unnecessary legislation that burdens libraries and, more importantly, stymies curiosity and understanding that should be the privilege and responsibility of individual patrons and families. I am worried that I have been worried that the modified version has not been followed very closely, and that people might have just felt worn down by this and not kept up. But I'm very impressed with the turnout today, and that has helped me feel better. I do want to refer to the words of Neil Maxwell, don't get into the thick of thin things. And I think I have really felt that through this whole issue. And I think it should just be dropped, not amended. And I also want to say I've been very impressed by, from you on, they're the only ones I could see, have been very attentive. And I have sensed understanding and interest. And that just has meant everything. So thank you for your time.
Being in committee
I'm a
this morning.
retired nurse. I'm representing myself.
Thank you. Going to invite Senator Schroeder back up to close system, and thank you for your passion and everything you do in that regard. So, Senator Schroeder, the time's yours to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to just reiterate that, if I might, and I know I'm supposed to address the chair, but I want to thank the folks who came. My first time I ever testified in front of a legislative committee was on a library issue. And it was 13 or 14 years ago, and it was about filtering of the libraries. And I understand the passion, and I understand the love of libraries as a resource. I frequented the bookmobile in Kamei. My next door neighbor out in the middle of the woods, they moved there from California, and she was a former school teacher, had an extensive library that provided a resource. I was a reader from a very early age. I love these resources. I want to help protect them. I want to share some testimony that came through a third party. My dad called me. Apparently, I'm in the Lewiston Tribune, photo of me and everything. And my high school librarian, Patty Crease, called my dad and said, I see Jeff's in the paper. And she, I think, would be testifying against Senate Bill 1289 because she, like the majority of these folks, don't believe it's necessary. But I think we all see that something is necessary. And so I tried to craft something that would do both. It would protect our children from pornography in libraries to the extent it exists by determining whether or not it exists, and then protecting them from frivolous or unfounded suits. Addressing the concerns of the gentleman on the second floor. So to go back through some of the testimony and to help allay some of the concerns. With respect to not being able to segregate or move materials sua sponte or on their own, nothing precludes a library from doing so. With respect to the difference between 1514 6A and 6B, nothing precludes a library from using on their own the standards in 6B when they curate their collections. It's just that if the state mandates something to the libraries, then we need to remain constitutional, and 6A does it. We heard again the argument about Pope v. Illinois. Again, it doesn't apply to adult children. Material harmful to minors is defined, and we use the standard in Ginsburg and the Miller test. The myth is that this threatens library staff with fines and legal actions. It doesn't. The concern I've heard is that library staff wouldn't be able to keep up with some of these requests. Nothing precludes a library's board of directors from establishing bylaws that allow them to accumulate requests and schedule these hearings once a month or once a quarter, or however, like we do in planning and zoning commissions. This is kind of what I modeled a lot of this procedure after. So a library could publish one public notice that had 15 books, 1 book, 20 books. Thursday night, in March, we're going to have book night, and we're going to review these books. It's designed to alleviate some of the burdens on library board members and school board members if they wish to designate a review committee, or they can stand as the material review committee themselves, so long as one of them is a parent of a minor child. The idea of having a public hearing being somehow a threat, I think, isn't completely accurate, because public hearings are run similar to the way you conduct committee hearings. In other words, it's not a free-for-all. The chair runs the meeting. You hear from the one person, then that person stops talking, you hear from another, and then you have a person close. So it's an orderly process that has to come to some conclusion versus what we have now, which is, again, showing up at open mic night and yelling. Doesn't work. It helps, I think the process will help educate the community about the standards that are needed. I don't think that this is going to result in material that is educational or material that merely makes passing mention of homosexuality or things like that, because even though that's in the definition in 1514-6, they're omitting the fact that there's a whole rest of 1514-6A that requires prevailing community standard and all of this stuff. Community standards, I think, can be elucidated in the testimony at the hearing. You get a sense of what people think, as we have heard today from people in the library community. With that, I think I have addressed most of the concerns, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Schroeder. Senator Burnt.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. At least the folks from my district that I listen to in Meridian, the made available and restrict access language in relocation of material to the adults, is that enough? And if kids can wander into the adult section, can you clarify if the library would be afoul of running afoul of the law?
Senator Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Burnt, so first, the first step here is the material has to be determined that it must not be made available to minors. So the first blush, if a kid first finds a book that's he shouldn't have found, that doesn't start any of this process. That's the process. That's where it starts with the parent going, whoa, 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 where'd you get that book? Well, it was over here. go to the librarian. Do you think this is appropriate? My kid just found this. And so on. And then the parent and the librarian will walk through the process, looking at the form, and then see if the work is even in the money in terms of being objectionable minors, because some stuff just isn't going to be. But in terms of the library having to restrict access to people with IDs or being over 18, that's only with respect to those books that have been found to need to be segregated by the review committee. There's nothing to preclude a library from voluntarily doing so at the request of a patron.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that clarification, Senator. Just another thing, just to clarify what community standards are. Are communities, obviously, per statute, what is defined inappropriate could be deemed a community standard, but could a community standard also be deemed a certain thing based upon what the Board of Trustees or the decision makers deem that what that is?
Senator Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Byrne, yeah, so yes, you're going to you live in the community. So one thing community standards aren't are what we say they are in this body. Community standards are set by that community. And so the elected representatives of the board that appoint the review committee or the review committee itself are going to have a sense of what their community standards are. The patrons that show up to testify, the parent who fills out the form, you're going to get a sense of what the community standards are, and then you're going to use those and that testimony in your reasoned written decision about the work in question.
Committee, Senate Bill 1289 is properly before the committee. Oh,
I guess
maybe it
I
isn't.
would have one further thing is I guess I respectfully request that you send this to the floor with a due pass recommendation. I have seen some concerns. I have not seen anything in the entire volume of material that leads me to believe that this bill needs to be amended, that it can't be, that the concerns can't be addressed with the board, with either the board's latitude to set parameters or the board's attorney to guide them through the process to make sure they aren't running afoul. So I would request respectfully that we send this due pass versus sending it to the amending order. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Committee, Senator Anton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to move that we send this bill to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Motion by Senator Anthon, seconded by Senator Harris, that Senate Bill 1289 be sent to the Senate floor with the recommendation that it do pass. Discussion on the motion. Senator Taves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate all the testimony that we've heard today. I want to give a little bit of my background. I grew up with a lot of time in the libraries. I loved our local library. And my mother and my grandmother were both educators. My grandfather had his master's degree in library science. So a love of books goes back to my very young years. Unfortunate, and I know that the majority of you are not seeing it this way, but my family, we used to spend a lot of time in our local library, hours and hours. Like that was a second home to us. And a few years ago, before this became an issue that's publicly debated, one of my children, who was very young, came to us with a book that was concerning to us. We gave it to the librarian. We asked him to put it behind the counter. It was sexually explicit in our opinion. And we went back again, and we found the same book was brought to us by one of our children, and we were like, we didn't feel like it was a safe place for our kids anymore. Now, whether we should have taken it to another level, maybe we should have taken it to somebody else in the library, but for us, we just left the library. We just didn't go there as often. We have 5 kids, so we do monitor them as closely as we can, but sometimes it used to be someplace where they just all ran around and grabbed books and read them. So I think that's important to know that there are people like my family that have left the library because of frustrations and concerns. I never wanted them to ban any books. I just wanted them out of reach. It didn't have to be in the adult section. It just had to be behind the counter or someplace where we could decide whether our children had access to that. We talk to our children about all of those things, and we do it at 3 different stages in their life. We're very deliberate about it. So what I'm concerned about is that while I applaud the efforts of the sponsors of this bill, I think we've successfully found a compromise that virtually everyone opposes. And I mean, I think that's a sad truth. I know that there was a few people that supported it, but what I've heard mostly today is that it's not a good policy. My constituents that are concerned, like me, about what's in our libraries, they don't seem to think it's a good policy. And one side says that it's taking things too far. The other side says it's not taking things far enough. I can't support this legislation as written.
Senator Anthony, I apologize for skipping you. I should have allowed you to speak to your motion, so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. And I appreciate the testimony that we've heard today. I appreciate all the librarians who are here. And hopefully get some appreciation for the fact that we have a bill before us. One of the things I've learned about legislating over the years is you get very complicated matters in a bill, but your vote is not complicated. It's yes or no. And that's a tough thing sometimes, and that's a tough thing today. I sincerely believe the librarians who have testified today that there's not a problem. I think they believe that, and I think that may be true. I think that in my own district, we have some very lovely libraries, which I support, that it is not a problem. But I think, as Senator Taves has mentioned, there have been some problems, and that's what's brought us here, at least in part. Now, the thing that puzzles me a little bit, and the reason why I made the motion I made, is because I'm just looking at the bill and I'm looking at the code. Here's what this bill is meant to keep away from children. This is from Title 18, Chapter 15. Material or a quality of any material or any performance or any description or representation in any form of nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or sadomasochistic abuse when it appeals to the prurient interests of a minor as judged by the average person, applying our community standards. And it also has to depict or describe representations or descriptions of nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or masochistic abuse, which are patently offensive to the prevailing standards in the adult community. I'm reading this is the description, this is what we're talking about today. With respect to what is suitable material for minors, and includes but is not limited to patently offensive representations or descriptions of intimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated, or masturbation, excretory functions, or lewd exhibition of the genitals or genital area. And then here's the clause that I heard Senator Schroeder talk about. Nothing herein contained is intended to include or prescribe any matter which, when considered as a whole and in context of which it is used, possesses serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors, according to prevailing standards in the adult community with respect to what is suitable for minors. It's pretty specific. I think it's pretty clear, and I can guarantee you what is described here is something I would never show to my children, ever. So I think maybe we're just misunderstanding, I think, what we're talking about today when I hear people say it needs to be available for children. This needs to be available. I heard that testimony today. Does it? I've heard testimony that we need to have the freedom to read this. What I just described, we need to have our children have the freedom to read this. I've heard that libraries can't meet with the demands of this bill to keep this, what I just described, away from children. I've heard it will cost too much. Really? That's the weighing of this? This is how I'm thinking this through in my mind. This here is it's gonna cost too much to keep this away from our children? I'll pay a little extra, okay? Local control. We need to have local control to have this available to our children. I don't think so. We need to stimulate curiosity. Heard that testimony today. So this stuff needs to be available for kids because we got to stimulate curiosity. So all of those arguments I heard, I agree with, except for when it comes to this. This, I do not agree, has to be available for children in the library. And to the extent it's happening, and I've heard some instances where it is happening, I think it is proper for the legislature to say, this is not appropriate. And that's why I've made my motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ruckte?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Well, Senator Ruckte hasn't talked today, so if you feel like I'm skipping you, Senator Winthrow, then consider yourself skipped.
Well said, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I just view the debate and discussion a little differently than the sponsor of the motion or the maker of the motion. I didn't hear that sort of testimony that he was refuting. What I heard was we have a system that works well already. And let me actually start by thanking Senator Schroeder. I have been very pleased. I'd say surprised, but I'm not surprised anymore. Senator Schroeder does good work. He's thorough. In these areas where he has expertise, you can expect that he's going to provide a solution that he thinks is workable and that brings people together. And so I've been very impressed with the work he's done here. Nevertheless, I'm going to vote against the motion. And I start with this. Is there a problem to be solved? And I just don't see the problem. We have local control. We have libraries and library boards who I think are committed to solve problems that are brought to them. They have a process in place. They have worked to make sure those processes work. I have said this before on different bills, but I think it warrants repeating. We are a pluralistic society. The people of different cultures, classes, religions, ideologies, values who work together and sometimes against one another to influence government policies and are active in the governing process. And to me, that describes libraries in a way, because people of all different values, religions, races, all different kinds of people come to the libraries to use those resources to gain knowledge. And I have no doubt that there are good families in our communities. Senator Taves comes to mind, his family, who come to the library and they run into a problem that they need solved. But I think the libraries are capable as is in solving those problems with the systems they have in place. We certainly have the right to raise our own kids and make sure they stay away from materials that we're not comfortable with. That is the right of every parent, and they should exercise that. I will fight tooth and nail to make sure families have the right to do that. Where I hesitate is when that effort to fight for that right starts to be spread across the entire community to all families, and it prevents other families from being able to raise their kids the way they want to. Not everybody has the same sensitivities to these issues, and that doesn't mean that they want to expose their kids to the things that the sponsor of the motion mentioned. It just means that they look differently at different materials. That's okay. That's what a pluralistic society is all about. Most importantly, there's been this recurring theme of, well, we've got to do something. We've got to do something. Do we? What is wrong with just saying no? Just saying no. It's not a problem. We've got things handled the way things are. We don't need to do anything here. Let's move on. Let's use the systems we have in place. Now, I understand the worry is that people will keep coming back and pursuing these issues. That is their right, as long as they use the process that we have in place, as long as they stay within the bounds that the law prescribes. That is their right. It's a pluralistic society, and we have to accept that too. But I think we have the tools that we need, and I'll be voting against the motion.
Senator Winthrop, I'm tempted to go to Senator Winter, but I don't want you to get a complex. So Senator Winthrop.
So kind of you, Mr. Chair. I'll just make a couple comments in that I really underscore what Senator Rucke said, and that's what I've been thinking this whole time is what is the problem we're trying to solve? And I do think the problem is going away because if you look at the numbers that I did quote earlier, last year, according to the Library Association, I asked for recorded complaints. There were 15 official complaints recorded for 137 titles. And quite frankly, 16 of those were in West Ada, and there were repeat complaints by small group of individuals, okay? So we see 15 last year. The year before, there were 32. And the year before that, there were 3, 2, 3, 1, 4. So I do think it is a problem that will subside, especially if we kind of stand our ground and we support the libraries and the process that are in place. I did an extensive search on the web to see how many libraries have policies already. There's a lot. I couldn't get to all of them, but I'm told them by the library associations that 95% do have, and I'm guessing the other 5% are going to get them. So I think that exists already, and I really appreciate the wherewithal it takes to be a librarian and a library trustee in these days. So thank you for that. As Senator Anthony says, I don't think anybody wants us to submit to give children pornography, and I'm pretty clear and pretty sure there's no pornography. I've looked in the libraries, and the people looked at me funny, like, why are you looking for pornography? And I tell them I'm a legislator, and then they really start asking me questions. I haven't found the pornography. What I'm concerned about when we talk about the additional costs is that some folks won't really understand what the Miller test is, nor appreciate it, nor respect it. And so they're going to continue to put books into the queue, like Fry Bread and some of those others, that then you will be required to go through this entire review process. I don't know that we've given librarians the ability to say, oh my gosh, that's Fry Bread. We don't have to review that, right? And then here goes the process, and then we have to spend all those resources on a frivolous complaint. I could understand if, when I went to my public library and I saw the book on sexual health education, it was appropriate and scientific, and I could see where as a parent, that would be a good use of my library resources. But then I could also understand the other side. People might be frightful of it. So there is a review process for that kind of a book. And then Miller test would then go forward. So number one, I do think we already have a good process in place. And I think it's going to take me great strength to say, okay, that's enough. And I think the other thing I just want to land on is this notion of community standards. Our country has a long history of community standards when it comes to things that we've done that are wrong. Discrimination based on race, segregation, slavery, and so forth. And so I am concerned a little bit about that because as we heard from Mr. Grove, who was talking about being a minority and a majority, sometimes the community standard might erase something, maybe even unintentionally. I think it is essential that constitutional principles already exist, and those are what we need to make these decisions on. I'm satisfied from hearing from the librarians and everybody else today that this is a problem that has been solved, and there is process. I see the number of complaints are starting to go down, as happens. And finally, I guess I would just say, when we talk about protecting children, we have to protect all children. And I think about the way I was raised in an evangelical household, and I wasn't taught what sexuality meant. And here I was, a grown adult in a college, and didn't even know how my body worked. And that is scary. Because I have other people, boys, telling me how it works, and I should trust them. That was my first lesson as a young adult, That is so important to provide information. So with that, I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chair. I will be voting no.
Senator Winder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, committee, for considering this bill. Just a quick review. I want to thank the librarians that have come and testified for or against. This was the first hearing that a librarian actually came and said, you know, we do make mistakes once in a while, and we do need a process, and this isn't a bad piece of legislation. I want to thank the State Library Association, or Association of Librarians, to come and testify, who were actually involved in the negotiations of this bill, and part of the stakeholders that showed an interest. And so I just want to thank them. But I also want to go back a couple of sessions ago when I poo-pooed the idea that there were inappropriate books in our libraries. And I did it publicly. And then at a birthday party for one of my great-grandkids, one of my granddaughter's friends brought me a book that her third grader had brought home from school. And it wasn't about baseball. I can assure you that. And from that day on, I went, I don't know how big the problem is, but there is somewhat of a problem. So how do you deal with it? We started out 3 sessions ago, we were going to put librarians in jail. We're going to fine them $2,500 personally. That would scare me if I were a librarian. But where are we today? We have a due process. We have a system that will allow the system to work. And there may be some districts that don't have a due process. And for all those that are doing it, well done. That's not what this is about. I also think that as we look at, this whole idea of what's age appropriate or not, you can say it's up to the parents, and it is up to the parents, but if I go into a library and my parent's not with me, then what happens? So I think it is a real issue. No matter how big you think it is, it's an issue. And laws are made to protect the minority, not necessarily the majority. Because sometimes the majority maybe will say something, maybe will do something that doesn't really respect a majority or a minority position. So I think it's important that we understand this effort that's been made by the parties that 2 sessions ago wanted to put librarians in jail and fine them $2,500, have now come to the table with a due process and a pretty reasonable approach at how to deal with the issue when there is a mistake made. So I hope that we can all go away from here realizing that sometimes making law is a process of making sausage, but it's also a process of listening. And I think this committee's listened to the librarians. I think we've listened to our communities. And I also think that while this law is not perfect, none that we make are perfect, or we wouldn't have to change them. We wouldn't have to amend them. We wouldn't, we just write them down one time and be gone forever. But that's not the way it works. And so I appreciate those that came, shared their opinions, and I appreciate the committee willing to hear this bill, and I appreciate the sponsors from both the House and the Senate who've worked diligently on this for many, many, many months to come up with a solution that hopefully has everyone mad on each side. It didn't go far enough or it went too far. So hopefully you'll support this as a committee and send it to the floor with a due pass. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Winder. Senator Burnt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. Thank you to those who testified, and very grateful for you taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I'll be brief. We're under the gun at time. We're in a time crunch, but one thing that comes to my mind time and time again is that which was said by Ms. Ruck and Ms. Proctor regarding parental control. I think the greatest and most important safeguards we have in libraries are parents. And we hear it time and time again that, you know, at least when I was young, my parents always knew what books I checked out, and they were with me at the library every single time. And when fast forward as an adult, taking my kiddos to the library, I knew exactly what my kiddos were looking at. And Senator Taves gave a great demonstration of what happens when parental control works. He felt like, you know, that there was inappropriate material there, and he took action according to his values and what was important to him. I feel real strongly about that. Another thing that gives me heartburn about this bill, and I've been very transparent about this with both bill sponsors, is the private right of action. I just think this is flat out poor policy. I've never liked it. I will never like it. I've asked the bill sponsors numerous times to take it out. So I'm not saying anything that they haven't heard. I just do not like this policy, period. I think it causes far more problems than it solves. However, I think 95% of this bill makes sense, and I think I will be supportive of it. I will vote yes, because I think it requires more debate on the floor. But I do so with the caveat that I may vote differently when it hits the floor. Thank you.
Don't see any other discussion. We do have a motion to send Senate Bill 1289 to the floor with a recommendation that do pass. I'm going to err on the side of being safe and ask our Secretary Peggy to call the roll.
Senator Winder. Aye. Senator Anthony.
Aye.
Senator Harris.
Aye.
Senator Lee. Aye. Senator Taves.
Nay.
Senator Wintrow. Nay. Senator Ruchte. Nay. Senator Guthrie.
Aye.
Senator Byrne. Aye.
Sorry about that. Okay.
That was actually kind of funny. That motion carries 6-3, and Senators Taves, Ruchte, and Wintrow will be recorded as voting no. So with that, again, we thank you for your involvement and your participation in this issue that's been going on for a few years now, and safe travels back wherever you come from, and thank you again. Committee, we're adjourned.